one should always be in love. That is the reason one should never review movies. Let's talk about The Invite.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So, today we're going to be discussing or debating The Invite. But before we get into that, you already know what time it is, movie recommendation time. So, I can't lie to you, this week has been a very busy week. I had Congolese Independence Day yesterday, so I was out the whole day and I only managed to watch Invite yesterday. So, I can honestly say the only thing that I've watched this week is called Power Book 3, Raising Kanan. I'm currently on episode 4, I believe, the most recent episode. If you haven't seen the Power franchise, it's pretty much a crime franchise based in New York. This story is about a character called Kanan. He's very prolific in the original Power franchise, and he ends up dying in that franchise. But obviously, because he was such a prolific character, which was played by the rapper 50 Cent, they ended up doing Power Book 3, which is based on his story and his upbringing and how he pretty much came to be. So I'm just following his story. This is the final season, it's season 5, and I'd recommend you guys to watch the whole franchise, not just the current season that I'm watching. It's really good if you like those type of, I wouldn't call it a crime show. It was like UK version of it is like Top Boy, the type of gangster shows, pretty much that type of vibe.
I think you've recommended Power before. Is it
Yeah.
is it like a current ongoing show?
So there's Power Book 1. Power is the first series, and Power Book 2, I believe, is Tyreek's story. So there's different powers. And in terms of an ongoing show, so Power 1 and Power 2 is a sequel. But Kanan's story, that is a prequel. So that's based on his past life. Whereas the other powers, that's pretty much, it's a sequel.
So they're like spin-offs, or are they like different seasons of the same show? Or
They're spin-offs. So the second Power, that is a spin-off, but it's still a continuation, obviously, of the first one. So they're all in the same, pretty much all in the same universe. It's just the Power Book 3, which is Raising Kanan, that's a prequel. So that's basically going back in the past. And they're actually going to release another prequel, which is actually going to be based on Tommy's character and Ghost's character, and they're the main characters in the first ever Power that was released. It's very like all over the place when it comes to the timelines, but it's easy to follow and it's not complicated.
and are they separate stories with just characters spinning off from the main show, or is it like something you should watch like from the beginning?
I would say something you should watch from the beginning, because you won't understand what's going on or the significance of certain characters or certain storylines if you haven't watched any of the previous powers. But you could watch it separately if you want to, it's fine. It's just certain moments might not hit as much for you in comparison to someone who's watched it.
Okay, so it's not like it uses the same characters and you need to know their history, but it's not like a linear story that starts in book 1 and goes to now.
No, there's moments and they all link and you'll understand certain moments. However, you can still watch it and be entertained.
Because that's kind of a problem with a lot of like long-running franchises where you're not sure what exactly counts and what exactly is necessary. Do you have to watch the entire thing from the beginning, or are there certain points where you can jump on? That's always like whenever I try to get into like a long-running franchise with multiple shows, it's never quite clear what is necessary and what isn't. But yeah, so that's why I'm asking. All right, so this week I watched Vice Principals, which is a 2016 HBO comedy show about two vice principals in a high school who hate each other's guts. They're very competitive, they're very ambitious, they want to become principal, and they cannot stand each other. And when the principal retires, both of them think that one of them is going to get the promotion to principal, and then it turns out that the government brings in a principal from outside who is like this academic and a PhD, and she's this career principal who keeps jumping from school to school, essentially fixing those schools and then moving on. And both of them then engage in a rivalry with each other, and they kind of band together to kind of get rid of this principal, and they're trying to not get fired in the process, right? And so that's kind of the conflict. And in between, they have very strong personalities, and they have their own issues going on, and their school politics, and just this job of teaching and all of that. Like that all kind of comes together. It's pretty funny. It's not the funniest comedy I've ever seen, but it is a quality show. There's 2 seasons of it, and I'm near the end of season 1. I don't know if it ends well or not, but season 1 is definitely a good watch. It's one of those cynical comedies, like dark comedies, where everybody is an awful person, and that's where a lot of the conflict and a lot of the humor comes from. And that's not my favorite thing, but this one doesn't overdo it, right? Like a lot of them are really miserable and like everything is terrible and everybody is a jerk and so on. And while that's here, it's not quite as bleak as most of those kinds of comedies are. So it was a little bit more watchable. And in between, it's just got good acting, good writing, good production values, all of it. So that's worth a watch.
Okay, cool. How many seasons there? Sorry.
Two seasons, 18 episodes.
2 seasons, 80 episodes. Okay, cool. All right, cool. I'll check out the trailer to that. Looks like it's time for the main event. Daniel, can you please do your thing?
So, The Invite is a comedy drama movie about a married couple whose marriage is going through a rough patch. And they invite their upstairs neighbors to a dinner party. The whole thing kind of reaches a climax when the other couple invites them to an orgy, essentially. And they are kind of shocked by this because they did not expect this. The evening kind of takes a left turn as they consider the invitation and how that relates to their lives and their arguments and the state of their marriage and what kind of people they want to be. And the story then kind of unfolds and spirals out of control from there. So what did we think of The Invite?
Well, I'll say, let me start off by actually saying that I like the film. I was just expecting a bit more. And when I mean by a bit more, I mean, I thought it wasn't going to be a what you see is what you get from the trailer, but it pretty much was that. Of course, there's more to it. I like the film. I was just expecting there to be some sort of twist or some sort of turn. I always like the films that's based in one location because I always kind of like I kind of treat these as like my personal studies because, you know, as an aspiring filmmaker, you want to find ways on making a movie without spending a lot of money. And obviously this is one of the ways to do it. So it was definitely a good script. It definitely kept me engaged. And I wouldn't say there wasn't like an impending mystery because like I said, you see what you see from the trailer is what you get. I was just trying to figure out like what were they going to do to kind of like keep my interest and like how were they going to do it. And I think they did it in a smart way by not exposing, but kind of like showing how, you know, the problems of the couple. And it was, in a way, it was kind of like a weird therapy session. I don't know how it turned into a therapy session. It was good. It was a good film. Of course, not memorable. I wouldn't watch it again, but I had a good time.
So this is probably the best movie I've seen this year that I absolutely hated watching. So what I mean by that is the movie is undeniably well made. It is well written, well acted, well shot, well directed, everything. This is essentially four people in a room talking and just unraveling and like spilling their psychology all over the floor, right? That's what this movie is. Like this is adapted from a stage play that got turned into a Spanish movie, and this is essentially a remake of the Spanish movie from I think 2020, and but essentially taking the same story and just kind of reimagining it in a different context. And I cringed through like the first 90% of the movie where I said, okay, like clearly this is well made, but I hate watching this. I do not like these people. I don't like their problems. I don't like their hang-ups. I don't like all their little flaws that really are on display here. I do not relate to these people. I don't think they're interesting. If they were my neighbors, I would avoid talking to them. And then the last 10, 15 minutes happens. And they actually have something insightful to say, which is about kind of the nature of happiness and relationships and how to live your life, essentially. And that actually has something interesting to say, which is a high bar for me. A lot of the time, I really roll my eyes at how easily impressed people are when it comes to what movies have to say. When the big punchline happened, I sat in the theater and actually said, yeah, okay. Like I was ready to leave, right? Like I was not having a good time at that point, just based on, the personalities on display and all of that. And then I kind of stopped in my seat and said, no, this is actually a good point. Like this, I've not heard this before. And we'll go into that because I think that's the single most important part of this movie. But I'm unsure whether or not those last 10 minutes are worth it, because it's not like the first 90 minutes, 90% are just filler, but there's a lot of filler in there. And a lot of what's essential to the story is just not fun at all. As in, it is not, at least for me, it was not engaging to watch. I had to actively force myself to engage with these characters, not because it was bad, because it wasn't, but because of how unlikable and insufferable these people are. Let's talk about it.
Mm. So, where to start? With the proposition that of the neighbors, because for me, I thought it was kind of like, I wouldn't say smart, but I appreciated how, even though that's not really my type of, like, these type of, the whole orgies and stuff, it's not really my type of film. But with that proposition, I felt like it was pretty cool how they used that as a vehicle to expose the cracks in Joe and Angela's relationship. So I don't know how you felt about them using that as a way to kind of, like, like you said, unravel the state of their relationship. Because pretty much when we watched the trailer together, right, and the trailer looked cool, but like, when you saw the trailer, did you think there was going to be anything else? Because I'm pretty sure when you saw the movie, you said, okay, this is pretty much what you see is what you get from the trailer. So did you think there was going to be anything else to the film?
I actually thought it would turn into a horror movie of some kind.
Yeah.
Because the trailer really dances around what the invitation is. And they frame it as something really awkward and shocking and, something really momentous, right? Which, if you were in that situation, it would be all of those things. But like the trailer makes it look a lot like something sinister is going on, right? At least that was my takeaway from the trailer that I saw. And then the Wikipedia page before the release of the movie did everything in its power to avoid giving any plot details at all. So they were making a huge deal out of what the invite is, right? Like it's not really it's implied in the trailer, but not really stated. And it was withheld from every other place that I saw. And to me, that looked like there was some big twist that would be the thing. It's a little bit like the drama earlier in the year, where they also dance around like what the big reveal was, and then it ended up not being a big twist. And here again, it's kind of exactly what they said it was from the beginning. But then as you watch it, it takes on a little bit of, like, it's not really about that, right? It's not about somebody being invited to a sex party. It's about somebody being put in a situation where they have to confront questions about themselves that they've been running away from, right? And them kind of being put on the spot and having to make a choice about how to respond to the invitation is basically the catalyst for them to confront each other about what they want out of their relationship and why they've been so unhappy for the preceding amount of time, right? I think that's what that is about. And like what they actually do about that, and how, whether or not they accept or not, is not even really the point. It's a little bit, but like the main point of it is they have to kind of look each other in the eye and have to decide what kind of marriage they want to have, right? And what kind of life they want to have together going forwards. And I think that was pretty effective. The problem is that there's like half an hour of talk around that topic, and you could cut, like, this movie is like, what's the runtime? This movie is 107 minutes. I'm sure you can cut this to 60 and still preserve the really important moments in this. Like, there's a bunch of milestones where they go from being stressed in their work and being unhappy in their marriage all the way up to the big showdown and confrontation in the living room, right? Like there are several steps to that. And I think that part is pretty well done, where it kind of just, it's like an exercise in frog boiling, where it just takes one small step at a time. And before you know it, they are having an existential crisis. And I think that part is quite well done, but just as I was watching it, and even in hindsight, I'm pretty sure half the steps are not necessary. And a whole bunch of time is spent on people just reacting to things or talking about things that are not quite necessary for the point of the story. And that is kind of the big part where I'm saying, okay, this is short of excellent because of that. Where if the script was just tighter and they made a few jokes less and they cut out a few of the milestones and just focused on what is their marriage like and why it's like that, and maybe do a little bit more work actually foreshadowing the important stuff as opposed to spending time on stuff that is not as essential, I have a feeling it would be a stronger movie.
Can I ask you a question? Why? Because I didn't receive any inkling that the wife, in terms of like the wife's character and her persona, because she was definitely like, she would pretty much just agree with whatever the neighbors were saying and try to get them to like each other. But is that, I wouldn't say lazy script writing, but because I think certain things in the script need to be justified, like certain actions in the script need to be justified, especially when it comes to characters' personality and just their character in general. So with her, I don't think there was like any inkling or any like, there wasn't anything to tell us why she was like that, unless I'm missing something. So that's just like a question I wanted to ask in case you picked up on anything, because I was proper just trying to understand, like, why is she like this? Is there significance to the way that she's behaving? Am I missing something, or is this just her character?
Yeah, so I think they do more for Joe, where they spend more time on why is he like this, right? Like, why is he so touchy about his band and about the fact that he inherited this building And that's basically why they can afford to live there, because his parents owned it, right? And it kind of ties into his sense of being a failure and that sort of thing. As for Angela, maybe this is something where you have to see it twice. But as I was seeing it, she just came across as like a very neurotic and controlling and judgmental person to me. And all of those things had reasons, but I didn't feel like there was as much of a story there. I think she was just somebody who was too tightly wound and who needed to relax and let go. And she needed permission, somebody's permission to do this. That is where Pina and Hawk come in, where they basically lead by example by showing this is how your life could be if you were more like us. And Angela really wants to be more like them, but she can't really because it's not in her nature. And it seems to me, at least on first watch, like that is Angela's problem, that she's just not a relaxed person. And that is the source of all her problems. And maybe that is what Joe, like that's what she saw in Joe to begin with, right? That like he's this like laid back stoner musician, and maybe that is the kind of person she needed in her life, and he's no longer that, and that is why things no longer work out. It's maybe one possibility, but I didn't feel like we got a lot of background as to why Angela was the way she was.
But don't you think Angela's behavior in terms of her being like a control freak was justified? And the reason why I say that is because with Joe, his main argument is that he kind of like wants to be unhappy, isn't he? Allowed to be unhappy with his life. And I hear it, but at the same time, that affects your partner. So it's going to have a knock-on effect. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you can feel this way, but if you're acting this way in the household every day, then how can you not expect that to have a negative effect on your partner? So
Yeah.
with Angela acting like a control freak, for me, I'm like, that is kind of justified. That's justifiable. Like you are allowed to feel that way, Joe, but don't expect your partner every day wanting to see you coming home being depressed, because that energy is going to rub off on her.
Yeah. So I think there's a few different parts to this. One of them is why is she that way? And I'm not sure we get a good explanation. But given that she is that way, a lot of the conflict flows from her personality, right? And that is something I wanted to bring up, which is that this was directed by Olivia Wilde, right? So this is her story in a way, right? Like she has a lot of control, and her character is portrayed as much more negative than Joe's is, right? Like that is I think an interesting detail here that's relevant. But a lot of the conflict seems to flow from her personality traits, and one of them is that she is very status conscious and very she has a need to be liked and accepted, right? She wants to be on good terms with her neighbors. She wants them to like her, and she wants them to like her apartment, which she's put a lot of time and effort into, right? They just moved in, they renovated a lot of it, and it's just now coming together, and she did a lot of the decorating, right? And a lot of the decisions, and he's pretty checked out in terms of actually shaping what that apartment looks like. And so this is her work, and she wants it to be recognized. She wants to get credit for it, and she wants to be accepted more than anything else. This isn't really about being, I don't know, being proud or anything like that. It's just she has a desperate need to be liked, right?
Yeah.
And because she is not on good terms with Joe, and because he is struggling in his career, and a lot of what she does is to kind of push him to be better, but she does it in a way where it's clear that she doesn't really care about him, like at the start of the movie, right? So this whole thing about he's got a bad back, I don't remember if it's just bad or if he had an accident or what, but she has no patience with his back being bad. And if anybody's ever had back problems, like it's debilitating, right? You cannot do anything when your back is bad, right? And right, like it's not a small thing, right? It's not just it hurts a bit. Everything is too much, right? And then for somebody to stand over you and nag you essentially it's just must be torture, right? I don't experience the second part, but the first part I have on one or two occasions. In the beginning, he has got back issues. She's making him ride this foldable bike, which is making his back worse. And she keeps trying to micromanage their lives, and it's not working out, and it's making Joe's problems worse. And she doesn't care, right? Because she's convinced that she knows better, and she probably does in many cases, but she has zero empathy. And that culminates in this line, or like this manifests in this line that you mentioned, which is where he says, can't you just let me be sad and miserable? Like what if I'm comfortable being miserable and just accepting my failures? And she just keeps pushing. And I think it comes out of like it doesn't come out of something negative or toxic. It comes out of the ambition to be better, but she views him as a tool for her success or for her life essentially, I would say. And that's a very negative character trait, right? Like there's no partnership between the two. They don't sit down and say, okay, this is what we want and this is what we can agree on and this is how we're going to achieve it. They just keep nagging each other. And he does it, he does some of it too, but they just do not talk to each other and they've long run out of patience with each other. And that is kind of their starting point. And it looks to me like most of it flows from Angela's personality, where she just cannot accept that her life is a certain way. It's not like they're suffering, like they're not poor, they're not on the street. It's just a little bit dull and a little bit not glamorous. And then Pina and Hawk show up, and they are better in every way that Angela cares about. I think that's kind of the root of the conflict in this.
I think because I just remembered they mentioned how she was a painter, right? And then I don't know what her reason was for quitting.
Well, she went to art school and never was an artist. And so she's been doing some photography as a hobby. She shows Hawk the apartment and he finds like a framed picture and he asks if it's from a famous photographer, and she says, oh no, I took this. And that then leads to a conversation about how she went to art school but never became a working artist.
Okay, cool. So I'm sure that was a contributing factor as well. So it feels like there's similarities between Joe and Angela in that aspect. So maybe even though they weren't clear about, because like you said, they were kind of going into Joe and his reasons for why he is, whereas they weren't really going for Angela. But I think maybe Angela's was kind of like moments where you kind of like put pieces together, which will lead to you figuring out why she is the way that she is. Even though, like I said, I was still a bit confused why her character was like that in terms of, like you said, needing to be loved and needing to be liked. However, once you start thinking about it, I was like, okay, there's that, and then there's this. But what contradicts that point that I made was when she asked Joe, because when Joe mentioned the line about can't you just be okay with me being sad and not happy with my life, then she came back and said, why would you be unhappy? You've got a house, you've got a beautiful daughter, you've got, you know what I'm saying, pretty much saying he's got a good life. So she was just like not confused, but that was her counter to him being unhappy. So that kind of does that contradicts what I'm saying, which is a bit confusing in terms of like her character.
I think it does play into this idea that she's a control freak, that she can't settle for good enough. Maybe she doesn't exactly need luxury, but she needs success and she needs acceptance by her peers. And she's missing that in her life. And like her life is not what she imagined it was when she was like 20 and in art school, right? Like you can imagine this kind of person imagining what kind of life they will have, and then it's not that great. And like it's fine. It's just a normal, boring life that most people have. And she's not happy with that. She's not okay with that, and she's not okay with Joe being okay with it, right? Like that's kind of the crux of it, where she always wants something better and she always wants to keep pushing him. And he just says, no, this is okay. Like, I'm okay with like this. She's just not. And that's because of her basic personality.
With the ending, because did it feel like it provided like a sense of resolution, or did it end ambiguously for you?
So I think it is ambiguous. And I think there's kind of two endings. The first one is like where Pina essentially sits them down and just tells them what their problem is. And basically has this like 5-6 minute speech. Her big punchline is it ties back to this Oscar Wilde quote at the beginning of one should always be in love. That is why you should never get married. And the point here is that all relationships end, and when they end, you have to move on to the next one. And the next relationship might be with the same person, or it might be with a different person, right? And that is reflected in, for instance, Joe not really moving on from being a failed musician, and them talking about how they probably should get a divorce, but they're staying together for the sake of their 12-year-old child, like essentially hanging on to an old status quo, right? And so the idea here is that unhappiness comes from not moving on when something is over. And that is exactly what Joe and Angela have been doing. Whereas Pina and Hawk each have instances in their lives that they reveal throughout the evening where they did move on when something was over, and they were happier for it, right? So Pina was married once, and I don't remember if she was married or if she was in a previous relationship, but that ended, and so she ended the relationship and moved on, and that's when she met Hawk. And Hawk, I think, lost his wife to illness, and that had an impact on him, and that is why he was no longer able to do his job as a firefighter, to the point where he got injured and almost got somebody else killed. And that is where he said, okay, I have to move on from my old relationship, I have to let go of my wife, and I have to let go of my calling, which is to be a firefighter, and move on and do new things. And that includes finding Pina, and it includes developing new interests, right? So Joe and Angela are unhappy because they cannot let go of things that are over. And Pina and Hawk are happy because they have been able to let go of things when they stopped existing or stopped working. And that is the kind of the big contrast between the two of them. And the sex parties are kind of like a metaphor for that, where Joe and Angela are not getting out of life what they want, and Pina and Hawk are getting what they want out of life. And that is manifested in the parties, right? Because like that is essentially going a level beyond what society accepts. Like it's kind of something you have to hide or not, at least not advertise, right? But it is like it's a level of self-fulfillment that you achieve against, like within the logic of the movie, right? It's something you achieve outside the confines of society and its rules. A little bit. Like it's not illegal, but it's not like society doesn't push you towards this, right? And Joe and Angela are afraid to make that kind of leap, and Pina and Hawk did make that leap, and their lives are better off for it.
But it felt like with Pina and Hawk, there was still some underlying issues there. That's why I thought, like, especially the scene where they were arguing near the end. I was trying to figure out what this means. I understand the film revolves around like the movie, the script revolves around Angela and Joe, but the way that basically Pina and Hawk are living in terms of like full transparency, is there like a flaw to that? And obviously, did that scene represent that? And like, what else was it trying to say? So with you, when you saw them arguing like that moment, do you think that was just done for comedic reasons, or do you think that was actually like not a significant moment, but a moment which they were trying to say something to the audience?
Yeah, so as I was watching it, I found it a little bit confusing because it seemed to muddle up the metaphor, right? Like this entire evening is a metaphor for how to handle your life, right? And how to achieve happiness and let go of unhappiness. It seemed a little bit like a subversion where we just spent an hour talking about how amazing Pina's and Hawk's lives are and their marriage is, or their relationship is. And then we kind of drag to the surface all the things that are not working about their lives, right? And like one that stuck in my memory was Pina is Spanish, and so her English is good but not perfect, and she misspeaks occasionally. And throughout the movie, Hawk corrects her. And then, like the fifth time it happens, she blows up at him about why do you always have to correct me? I think there was like another thing about Hawk where he's not quite who he says he was. I don't think it's the thing about Hawk not being his real name, because that kind of ties to moving on to something new, right? Like he adopted the name of Hawk when he moved to a new stage of his life, and that doesn't seem like a lie to me. Like that's kind of presented like one, but he owns it, right? Like he doesn't lie about it. When confronted about it, he explains it. He's not embarrassed exactly, so I think that's fine. But I think the big one is the thing about correcting Pena's Spanish, and I'm still a little bit unsure what the point of that was, unless it's just about living this self-actualized life and making these good life choices is difficult. And even you can get it mostly right, but you might get it wrong 10% of the time. And it's your job to address those when it comes up. That's kind of my take. It also means that perfection is not required. Like you don't have to be perfect to be happy, is kind of what that's saying, I think.
Yeah. No, you're right. I definitely do think the film was kind of like trying to show performative adulthood, because a lot of the time, especially when it comes to like the whole dinner parties, you could try to put on an act. Like it's I wouldn't say we're pressurized, but when you're in that type of environment, it feels like you need to kind of like put on an act where you're like successful, kind of like well-adjusted adults, even though deep down you're kind of like falling apart. So it had an opinion on the whole, the neighborly trope, where the whole friendly neighbor type of thing, where like that's what I was going to ask. That was actually going to be my next question was, what do you think the film was trying to say about modern urban living? But because obviously you've had neighbors, obviously I still live at home. So when it comes to the different flats that you've lived in and the type of neighbors that you lived in, could you resonate with it in any shape or form? Obviously, mainly between Joe and I forgot what his name is, Hawk. They've had their encounters. Joe wasn't really receptive to Hawk, and obviously a lot of the times they've had encounters in elevators and stuff. Did you kind of like resonate with anything?
There's not much to relate to there, I don't think. Like my neighbors have always kind of just been people I'm polite to in the hallway, right? Like I've never been friends with any of them. I've never invited any of them over. They've never invited me. This whole thing about like inviting over the neighbors for a dinner party, like that's not my experience at all. I think it has something to do with image and like put it, like as you say, it's performative, right? Like you are to an extent pretending to be somebody you're not, right? Especially when you don't know these people very well and you kind of just want to get along, but you don't really know them and they're not really your friends, right? So Angela specifically is very insistent on the right perceptions, and she keeps panicking every time Joe says something too blunt and too honest. Also, when they are arguing as Pina and Hawk arrive, they can hear them arguing through the door. Hawk basically says, look, if it's not a good time, we can go, right? It's okay. Angela keeps lying and says, no, 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 everything is fine. And then Joe says, no, actually, we were fighting, but we'll get over it, kind of thing, right? So he's kind of in the middle between the two. Like the whole thing is a performance, and it takes a lot until Angela specifically becomes sincere about anything because she's just so afraid of being judged and rejected. I think that's kind of like she's not lying exactly, right? But she's putting on that show because deep down she doesn't believe they deserve friends like Hawk and Pina, right? And I think that's the performative part in this. And that is kind of what gets pushed to the limit and breaking point throughout the evening.
Do you think they should have shown why they don't have friends? I get it, they're depressed, they're unhappy, I understand that. But they don't really seem like the type of people that wouldn't have friends. Like they don't really seem, they're not widows. They're just one, like you said, has a fear of rejection, and the other one is just a grumpy person. But grumpy people have friends. People who are scared of being rejected still have friends. So do you think they should have given a reason for that?
So there's no mention of other friends, right? And I don't think they even say something like, oh, these are the first people to ever come over or something like that, right? Like they might be the first in that apartment because they just moved in. But I don't think they're that isolated. They must have other friends. They just don't get mentioned because that's not what the story is about. I have a feeling Joe has friends, Angela doesn't, is my theory.
I forgot that they just moved into that flat. I thought they lived in that flat for a long time because it was Joe's dad's, wasn't it? That was his family home.
I think they inherited it a while ago and they've been renovating it the entire time. And they are just now getting it finished.
I see, because I assumed, obviously the only reason why I asked about the friend question, because I assumed they lived in there for a long time, obviously, because like you said, Joe inherited that house. So if they've lived in there a long time, I said, okay, well then that tells me they've been in that neighborhood for quite a while. And they did mention things like, oh, they don't really have people around. When obviously in the beginning scene when Angela was trying to look for drinks for them. So I assumed that they just didn't have friends. So I was like, okay, you've been in this apartment for a long time. Why wouldn't you have friends?
So my reading was that Joe's parents lived in that apartment and they probably died, would be my impression. And that's when Angela and Joe moved in. And that was a few months ago. That's my reading of it. So they have a 12-year-old, right? They've been married for well over a decade. They have lived in other places. And I'm sure they have friends. Like I'm sure they've had people over before, but just not in this place.
I see. Do you have any other questions that you want to talk about?
I've got a few more things. So one of them is we have kind of started talking about like the ending when we went on this whole tangent and this whole thing about Pina's monologue and her breaking down what happiness is now to achieve it. That's one ending. And then they kind of just disappear in a way that's kind of strange, right? Like I think Angela goes to get something. I think she rinses out the casserole dish, right, to give it back to Pina. And when she comes back, they're gone. And then she asks, "Hey, where did they go?" And Joe just says, "Yeah, that's weird." So that's a bit strange. Like I've seen some people say that they were imaginary the entire time, which I don't buy. But if they just left, why doesn't he just say, "Oh yeah, they left while you were in the kitchen"? Why is that made so ambiguous? And then they basically say, "Okay, we're gonna go to sleep, go to bed. It's been a long night." And Joe kind of goes to his study to sleep there, and he starts playing the piano for the first time in I don't know how long, over 10 years probably. And Angela hears it and comes to join him and play with him. And that's the last shot. What did you think about that? Does that mean they're getting back together? Does that mean something else? What's going on?
So in terms of why they left, I was a bit confused with that as well. Maybe they left, I just thought maybe they left because they fulfilled their purpose.
In the story, they're done, right? But why make it so strange?
Yeah, you're right. Because to be fair, the whole day was strange. So maybe that was just an add-on to that. And if it was, I don't know what other reason it could be besides that. But it is interesting though. I definitely do want to kind of like look into that. I was just like literally I was looking into that on the internet on social media, but I didn't manage to finish. So I'm gonna look into that later. In terms of the piano playing at the end, the way that the film resolved. So I feel like they are gonna try again. Him playing the piano, I was like, okay, he still wants to give the relationship, the marriage, another shot. Now I was trying to figure out if it was like if they're gonna try again in relation to what Pina said in terms of like the relationship has to end. Like when she said the relationship has to end, I thought I was thinking maybe she means like the relationship has like the way that the relationship is now, that has to end and they have to be new people in the same relationship, but that same relationship will be a new relationship. So that's how I took it.
Yeah, that's what it means. They are unhappy because they're holding on to what their relationship was like 10 years ago. And
Yeah.
that is not coming back. And that is why they're unhappy. And the way to be happy is to figure out what is next for them and if both of them are in that future together.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the whole thing.
Yeah. So him pretty much playing the piano is doing that. Just letting go of the past and just starting new.
But the way they signify that he's moving on and letting go is to go back to the thing he has not been able to let go of.
Yeah.
One of his big regrets in life is that he didn't become a successful musician and is really touchy about it. Hawk at one point wants to hear his records and he really is really touchy about it. And he will also not play on the piano, but he also will not let go of the piano, right? Like that was his problem. And then when he plays the piano, it kind of looks like he's kind of going back to the thing he's been running away from. But that is not something new. That is something that he's not been dealing with. And now he's dealing with it. And then they play together, which in my mind means being together, right? Like why would them playing piano together signify that they are moving on separately? Like that they are actually getting the divorce because it's just better for them. So in my mind, the last shot means that because all of their grievances out in the open and because they have shown to each other that they are willing to put in an effort again, that is why their marriage is saved. They're not stagnant anymore. They're now proactively trying to fix what's wrong. And that is why their marriage has a future. That's kind of my interpretation.
Yeah. But for me as well, yeah, I can agree with that as well. But also, I think with that piano thing, it's kind of like a notion in Christianity where in order for you to kind of like move on, you have to forgive yourself for what you've done. And then that's how you move forward. So that's kind of how I kind of like took what he was doing as well. Because you're right, even though the piano was a representation of his past, it was still something which was stopping him from moving forward and kind of like entering a new life, if that makes sense, a new relationship, new life. So I do agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, once you've accepted reality, that enables you to become a new person in a way, if that makes sense, a new you. So I think that's also a possibility as well with the piano playing at the end.
Yeah, maybe. I think the key part is that it's not something new. If he decided to get rid of the piano, that would have been a step forward.
So do you think that was pretty much like a middle finger to Pina's advice?
No, because making that decision is her advice. Like they've been running away from making that decision, and now he's made one, and that's the progress. But it's not. So the reason I'm harping on about it is I saw an account of somebody who was in a test screening for this movie, and when the screening was over, the director came out and asked essentially show of hands who thinks they're going to stay together. Half the hands went up. Who thinks they're going to separate? Half the hands went up. And I just don't get that ambiguity, right? Like I get that their stagnation is broken. I get that they are now engaging with what they have been running away from up until this point. I don't really see, like it seems pretty clear to me how they're moving forward at this point. Because if it wasn't the case, why are they playing together?
So you're saying you don't see how the audience think they're going to break up?
I don't see the argument for why people think that, yeah.
Yeah, I agree so as well. I think that was it was self-explanatory. Even like the scene where Hawk went in there to play the piano, he couldn't even touch the piano before Joe came in and, you know what I'm saying, stop that from happening. So for him to actually touch the piano and play the piano together with his wife, that's a clear indication that they're going to start again. They're going to try their relationship again. So maybe it's a thing where they were thinking more from the perspective of, okay, they've got so many problems. Like a real life relationship was, okay, down the line, even though they're trying again down the line, it's not going to work because they have so many problems. Maybe they were thinking from that type of way. But in general, from just based on face value and how the movie ended, it's clear that they're giving the relationship, the marriage, another go.
The opinions I saw essentially went along the lines of the music brought them together, and now them playing together for one final time is kind of the closing of their relationship. And then they will move on separately. And I don't really see the logic in that. I mean, it's not the most logical thing. It's an emotional thing, but still, I don't see why they would do it this way. And I don't quite see why the movie would use that as the visual shorthand for they're separating. There's much clearer ways of doing that, right? Like just them going into separate bedrooms at the end. It already signifies that they're moving into different directions, right? So I don't see it as that ambiguous. I see it as kind of the stalemate is broken. And that is the progress. And then they will figure things out from here on. Another thing I kind of wanted to talk about is I found these characters really unlikable and not relatable at all. Like, how did they come across to you?
When you say all four of them?
Yep, all four. Like Angela's the worst, but they're all various degrees of not relatable to me.
I thought they're relatable in the sense of the lack of community, because this was a point I was trying to make earlier, but I wasn't too great at making it. So I thought the film was trying to deliver the message of the lack of community when it comes to living in a community, neighbors,
Mhm.
etc., etc. So I thought they were good at delivering that message.
Like I just mean as people. If you met them in the street, would you like them?
I think, you know what's crazy? I think with Angela's character, yes, I would. The reason why I would have Angela's character is because I feel like I've been guilty of the condition that she has in life, where the fear of rejection and just kind of like being the yes man and agreeing with what other people are, just kind of like wanting other people's acceptance and agreeing with what they're saying. So I can kind of resonate with her in that sense. It's like, I kind of understand what it feels like to want to be liked if you aren't liked. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's why with
Yeah.
her character, I could understand why she was acting in certain ways, even though like I said, I didn't fully know her actual reasoning. I understand why people acted that way, but obviously, like I said, they didn't fully give us a reason for why she was like that. But
Yeah.
just characters' actions when they do that, I understand it. So yeah, I get why you say she was the worst, but I would have to say I kind of like I resonate with her and Joe, because with Joe as well, kind of like not being happy with life. Now, I don't want people to accept the fact that I'm unhappy and not want to do nothing about it. Hell no. But I resonated with him in a sense where I understand what it's like also not to be happy with life. So I could understand why he was pissed off. With me, like I said, there was certain things that they were giving where I was like, okay, I can understand why they're acting this way and I can resonate with them. In terms of if I like them or not, I wouldn't want to go to their house for a dinner party, but I could understand their struggles.
Yeah. No, but like that's the part that I'm trying to get to, which is, would you like being around these people and do you enjoy watching them? Because I don't. I actively find them grating and insufferable. And I like if I knew somebody like that in real life, I would not want to be around them.
Mm. I know you've got into Dio already, but could you just go into Dio a bit more? Is it like, what about them you just couldn't stand them?
Like there's this brand of artsy upper middle class Americans that I just cannot stand.
Yeah, I get what you.
All the way back in like 24, we watched Speak No Evil, and the characters were similar, just upper middle class, like educated city people, right? Like I am all of those things, more or less, right, to various degrees. But they're not my people. They hate me. I hate them. I cannot stand them. Like in real life, and I don't like watching these people in movies, right? Like that's kind of where I'm coming from. And what the point I'm building up to is that movies used to be cool, or the people in movies used to be cool, and these people are not cool. This is kind of like what I'm kind of trying to get at is my personal experience was that I hated these people. I hated watching them. And this is not the first time this has happened. Last year with Together, same deal, right? Like we can, if we went through our list of movies we've talked about, maybe 20% are like this, right? And that's because we do a lot of like science fiction and superheroes, right, where characters are not like this. But for like dramas, it's a high percentage. And part of why I like 90s and 2000s movies and shows so much is because people there used to be funny and cool. You used to want them to be your friends. See what I mean?
Yeah.
And I do not want these people to be my friends, right? Like I could deal with them if they're my neighbors or coworkers, but I do not want them in my life beyond that. I don't know. Like I'm just trying to establish a baseline whether or not you feel the same way, and it sounds like you don't.
No. So
not as strongly as I do, but just like, can you see where I'm coming from?
yeah, not as I can see where you're coming from, and not as strongly as you do, because I can understand their issues, but I wouldn't be their friend. But I can understand their issues. Definitely wouldn't. I wouldn't be Pina and Hawk's friend. They're just a bit too crazy for my liking. But
Yeah.
question though, how do you think?
I mean, I'm sure they have other interests than what's discussed in this movie, right? So they could be, I don't know, like Hawk could really be into, I don't know, fishing or something. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like there are ways to be friends with those two, and they are also quite judgmental and also quite full of themselves. I feel like they are more genuine. The not being genuine part is kind of one of the reasons for why Angela and Joe, like Joe is he's kind of a chill guy, right? But Angela specifically is kind of the worst in this. But my point is just like the entire milieu, like this entire class of people is not something I enjoy watching. And I think one of the reasons movies have been struggling is because the kinds of people who make movies has changed, where you would get movies like this like in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and they would be a little bit more fringe, whereas now they are the norm. Like if you're watching like a drama like this, you get characters like this, and if you don't like them, you don't like the movie. Like this, it's not about good story, bad story, whatever. It's about just a cultural thing where the kinds of stories we tell has shifted over the last 20 plus years, and it shifted towards people like Angela. And I don't like it. It's more like just from a standpoint of my enjoyment of spending time with these people, because I don't want to spend like 2 hours with them, or if this was a series, I don't want to spend like 20 plus hours with them. I just don't. And if you go back to like the 90s, even if I had nothing in common with the people on screen, they felt like more sincere people and more likable people, and it felt like you could have a conversation with them. And the people in this movie, you can't. Not really. I don't think there's a genuine bone in most of their bodies.
So what about if the film was told from the other's perspective? So if it had been told from the neighbours, like Peanut and Hawk, like how differently do you think you would have felt?
I think the only really genuine and honest person is Joe in this. Peter and Hawk are also putting on a show. I think they are more healthy and more well-adjusted than the other couple, but they still are putting on a performance. And I think that's the point of why the facade cracks a little bit in the last act, just to show that they are not perfect either. But just as people, they are. I don't find them all that likable. Is kind of my point. It's not just about these specific people. It's about movies being about these kinds of people, and how that makes movies uncool and less authentic. And that is why I think that's one of the many reasons for why people, I think, are drifting away from movies. It's kind of like a death spiral where the kinds of people who make these kinds of movies get more opportunities to make these kinds of movies, and so more people drift away from them. It's kind of I cannot prove this. I don't have statistics to back this up. This is my impression, my lived experience. I'm speaking my truth here, right? In a way. So I don't know, like, am I off base? Is this just me, or what's going on?
No, I think you've made a good point. These type of people, like you said, they're not my kind of people at all. Like I'm not really around these type of people.
But does it matter that half of all movies are about them? Does that decrease your enjoyment of these movies and your interest in these stories?
For me, if I was getting bad story after bad story with these characters, then yes, these type of people will leave a bad taste in my mouth.
This is a good story about uninteresting and unlikable people. I totally recognize the skill and intelligence that went into making this movie at the craft.
Yeah.
I did not enjoy watching it for 90% of the runtime. And it was because of the kinds of people that it was talking about.
But do you feel like that's because these kinds of people are doing these kinds of stuff?
Yes. These are the kinds of people who are allowed to make movies at the moment.
Yeah, and the other people, like let's say you'd want to see stories about, they're not really doing this kind of stuff.
Right. Because they're not getting funding, they're not getting greenlit. 20 years ago, they did. When was the last time you saw a drama or movie about a working class family? Like really working class?
I'd probably say,
it's been a while, right?
Yeah, Parasite?
Well, okay, Parasite was all about class, right? But I'm just saying, like
20
years ago, a lot of sitcoms used to be about like people who work like the shift at some factory or something. That has just fallen away. I'm not making this just about class. I'm not making a big point, like a political point here. I'm just saying whose story gets told has shifted, and it's shifted towards not the worse, but like the less interesting. And I used to, maybe this has to do with age as well. But like 20 years ago, when I turned on the TV or watched a movie, I liked the people I was watching, and now I don't.
Yeah, no,
you see what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get you.
You just accept this as this is just how movies are, or like, do you just not dislike these people as much as I do?
I'll be honest with you, it's not really a point that I've noticed until you've mentioned it. So I can't honestly say it's something for me. Like when I'm not necessarily concentrating on the characters a lot of the time. I'm just concentrating on the actual story, and if I found the story engaging. Now, what I have realized a lot of the time when it comes to movies was now a lot of characters look like freaking models. That's something which I definitely do notice, and that's something that I don't like. Like a lot of the times when I do see these type of movies, like unfortunately Netflix have been guilty of this, and even Amazon to an extent they've been guilty of it. I'd probably say like a streaming production company that hasn't really been guilty of this, the way it's like a big mix of like different type of personalities and peoples and looks, etc. is Hulu. Like Hulu are really good at kind of like just building stories around all types of characters.
And Disney shows are about people who look like art students.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like they just went to a campus and scooped up like 20 people and made a show.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's like there's a certain look, right? It's just what I'm saying.
Yeah. When it comes to like looks That's something that I noticed that I don't really gravitate to, because a lot of those stories are very is not the greatest, as well as the acting.
It's not so much about the story, it's about whose story gets told.
True, true, true. And it's even, you know what's crazy enough, even with the film that we liked, but we made this point as well. What's his name? You know, the guy that was an assassin. I think the film was called Hitman.
Hitman, yeah. Glenn Powell is like a professor who gets recruited to be an undercover.
Yeah, but his character was a character that wasn't really confident and etc. So when we spoke about it, I was like, well, you're Glenn Powell, number one. So it's kind of hard to believe that you're not really this confident guy that's not good with women, etc. So I was like, you know what I'm saying? Like stuff like that where I kind of do sometimes clock out. But then if the storyline is good, I end up being engaged again. But originally, I'll get that kind of annoying feeling in the beginning. Like, I freaking hate this storyline for this character because it doesn't make sense. Like, this guy is not relatable. What's like in no shape or form.
I mean, actors have always been pretty, right? Like, that's not so much the problem. It's more about the kind of person who gets their story told in a movie.
My main point was that's what a lot of the times when I see movies and the things that I pick up on is the look, rather than obviously your point that you was making before. So as I said, I can't really comment on your question because it's like that's just a point that you've made that I'm like, oh, okay, that you're actually right, and I can actually think about it. Whereas when I'm watching a film, a lot of the times what I pick up on is either the storyline or if the actor matches the actual character.
And I don't really have a profound like conclusion about this. It's just something I've noticed, and I mostly notice it because I actively dislike these people. I find them insufferable, and like just in the real world, right? And that diminishes my enjoyment of movies, and I think that makes movies uncool, and it kind of removes this aspirational aspect of movies where you watch these people because on some level you want to be like them, or because you would want them to be your friend, or something like that, right? And I do think it's just a cultural shift in what kinds of movies get made and by whom and for whom and so on. It's more of an observation. I don't have a big thesis about it. I'm not launching into a 10-minute speech about how this is breaking movies or something. It's clearly going on, and I don't like it. Mostly on the level of it's diminishing my personal enjoyment and ability to engage with movies. And it was just really at the forefront because every word out of people's mouths in this movie was like nails on a chalkboard. Right, and that they're not all equally bad, but like like I actively squirmed in my seat whenever people were talking. It's like it's that, right? And that's why I was a little bit hesitant about liking this movie outside of just recognizing the quality of it. And as I've thought about it more, my opinion has gone up because things that seemed unconnected on first watch, as I thought about it, like I had like two columns in my head. One is stuff that's relevant to the metaphor and stuff that's filler. And in the beginning, like 80% was in the filler column, and slowly things have been moving over. And now it's like 30-70, where 70 is like stuff that needs to be there. And maybe if I watched it again, which I don't want to do because I don't like these people, but if I did watch it again, maybe it would be like 20-80 or something like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like over time, the more I think about it, the more I appreciate the craft of it and the quality of it. And I don't want to watch it again. That's just not a place I want to be because there's a good movie here. Really good movies are shortlist, even this year. Like this year is better than most years. Certainly in the 3 years we've been doing this.
Yeah, definitely agree.
But it's still a longer list than normal, right? But this could be on the list of movies I want to rewatch. And I'm just not gonna because these people are in it. And if that's true for like 40% of movies, that's kind of a problem. Unless I'm the only weirdo.
But can I say something back on, I know you said you weren't trying to make like a point on class, but when it comes to this storyline, I feel like this is the class of people that do these type of things, right? If there was like a different class, like let's say a working class, I don't think those, maybe they'll come, I'm being a bit close-minded. I'm sure there are probably some working class type of people that do this, but I would say this type of activity is famous. I would say famously done by those type of people when it comes to that class. So I'm trying to think, would they have played the same effect if it was from, let's say, a working class family in I wouldn't say a poor, I wouldn't say like an estate, but basically what I'm trying to say is like the block of flats.
Sorry, and for our international listeners, estates are social housing.
Yeah. So apologies, thank you. So I want to say like maybe let's say an estate, right? Let's say an estate. Would it have had the same effect and impact? And I don't think it would have, because I don't think it would have been believable, because I don't think people in estates are doing that.
I think the story would unfold completely differently. So these people specifically, the root of their problems is that they overanalyze, over-intellectualize, and they just cannot just go with their feelings. I think at some point somebody mentioned something about, oh, I read an article or I read a book on this topic and this is what's going on, or this is the problem or whatever. And it's very intellectualized, and people cannot just simply, like Joe is the closest, where he says, look, I tried to be a musician. I failed. It sucks. let me be sad about it. Like, that's very down to earth, right? Like, he's the closest to this. All the others are very much intellectualizing it. And like a working class family would do it differently, I think. They might have the same problems, they might have the same arguments, but they would do it differently, and the movie would unfold completely different as a result.
Okay.
So it is relevant to the story. As much as I'm ragging on these people, this is somebody from that class criticizing people from that class, right? Because it is very scathing about how this kind of person talks and speaks, right? Like, there's a scene like in the very beginning, I think Joe just figured out that the neighbors are coming over, and he asks where their daughter is. And Angela says, oh, she's with a friend, and I called, and the mom is single, so there's no criminals or men around, so it's okay. First of all, that happens like in the first 10 minutes of the movie, and I said, oh, we're in for a terrible 100 minutes if this is normal. And it's not normal, it's just one line. Like, she talks about how she's been listening to podcasts, right? And that doesn't mean listening to us. That means listening to like true crime podcasts and academic podcasts, intellectualizing stuff like this, right? She doesn't even mean anything by it. It's just how she thinks, and it's how she conceptualizes things, right? She's been probably reading kind of articles and listening to podcasts about toxic masculinity and whatever, right? Like, and that is why she says it that way. But a normal person would not do this. Like, they would express that differently. I don't know even how they would say it, but it's something along the lines, oh, like she's with her friend and the mom is home, and I talked to her and she's fine. Right? That's how a normal person would say it. But Angela has to kind of make a big thing about it. Not even to make a point, but just because it's just second nature at this point.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I'll be honest with you though, when she did say that, that did trigger a thought, because I actually spoke to my friend not long after, and I was like, I never understood why my parents like were so, I wouldn't say against sleepovers, because I did do like, maybe like a few sleepovers when I was a kid, but it was like hard to persuade them to do a sleepover. And I was like, why do they have so much issues? But then when you grow up, you start to realize.
Was it the men? Were there strange men at these houses?
Nah. They never even really gave me a reason as to why they were they did. They just said, obviously, they would say stuff like, because we don't know them, etc., etc. So, well, I never understood that as a kid. But the more you grow up, you start to realize. And that's what I'm saying. This thought was triggered after she said, I was like, you know what? She's kind of got a point, because the more you grow up, you're like, now you kind of slowly understand. Obviously, you know more about the world and the crimes, etc., etc. So you understand, okay, now I kind of get why parents would be kind of like against sleepovers. Like, it just felt like what's the word? Is epiphany the word? I don't know. Is that the word? Yeah. So it felt like, it felt like that. I was like, oh damn. But I'll be honest with you, I found that moment kind of like, I wouldn't say funny, but I was like,
I mean, the basic idea of let's make sure we trust the people where our daughter is staying. It's totally reasonable, but it's just the way she said it was just like a statement about her as a person.
Okay.
As opposed to anything else, right?
Yeah, I get you. Cool.
All right. Any other thoughts on the invite?
Nah. Unless you got anything else, we could like jump into last thoughts.
Yeah, I think we covered it.
Yeah, overall, I liked the film. Now, it wouldn't be a film that I'll go watch again unless someone wanted to go and watch it with me. I'd be like, okay, cool. But just off my own accord and off my own free will, no, I wouldn't watch it again. But like I said, I liked the film. It was a good film. Had its comedic moments, especially like a lot of people in the cinema, they were laughing. They had a good time. I could resonate with some of the character problems, like the issues that they were dealing with internally as well as within a partnership, mainly from Joe and Angela, not Pina and Hawk. But yeah, besides that, I did want them to kind of like flesh out Angela's character just a bit more when it comes to where her problems stemmed from, the root of it. And I do understand that they, obviously they don't really have that much friends. Well, they might have friends, but I don't want to kind of go over all of it again. But I do kind of like understand the surface level when it comes to her problems. But I just wanted to understand a bit more when it comes to the way that she is as a person and why she is like that as a person. But besides that, it was a cool movie. I had a good time. So I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10.
So I'm very much split on how to rate this movie. The bottom line of it is I think it's really well made. It's tightly written. It's got a few things here or there where I think it's not quite as tight as it should be. And I think even after talking about this for a while and thinking about it, I'm sure there's a bunch of filler in here where you could cut a whole bunch of detail while still preserving the story and the conflict and the characterization of these characters. There's just a little bit much of it, and there's just a little bit too much wheel spinning in here. I cannot deny how good this movie is on a quality level and on a craft level, and just on is this a good movie level, this is a 5 out of 6. One of the best I've seen this year. I do think Marty Supreme is better, but there's not much that's better than this. The drama probably also, maybe this is number 3 in terms of just raw filmmaking quality. In terms of personal enjoyment, it's a 5 out of 9 because it's about people I don't like. I don't relate to them, about their problems, about their hangups. I don't relate to their personalities. And that actively made the watching experience uncomfortable, but not in a good way. I wasn't challenged, I was annoyed, just based on who do I have to spend the next 2 hours with. And so that's a 5 out of 9 on that level. I do think this movie gets props for actually having a point. The problem is it's basically 2 sentences towards the end, which is the whole thing about happiness comes from recognizing when a good thing has stopped working and hanging on to it will make you miserable, and moving on to it and finding the new thing will make you happy. That message is actually insightful and actually interesting and actually not boilerplate, right? Like you have not seen this 100 times before. And it gets points for that. I do think the way it's integrated into the story is mixed. It's not bad, but it could be a little bit tighter. But it's rare for a movie to actually make me go, huh, that's a good point. I say that maybe twice a year because most movies are just that rote and just that obvious and just that repetitive in terms of what it is they're saying. And this one isn't, and I wanna highlight that. But I'm not sure that's enough for me to actually enjoy the movie. It's more about recognizing that it did that.
Did you give a rating?
I gave 2.
Okay, cool. Well, all right, guys. Thank you very much for tuning into today's discussion.
So if you made it this far and you like what we do, please tell a friend, especially as we're heading into the summer low and our numbers are already beginning to drop as people go on vacation. If you think we're doing something worthwhile and you know somebody who likes movies, who likes talking about movies, just let them know that we exist. We would really appreciate that. And if you hate what we do, please tell an enemy for the same reasons.
Hi, guys. Thank you very much. We'll catch you next time. Au revoir.
Bye-bye.